I've spent over 20 years studying muscle loss in aging adults. And the single most underrated food for protecting muscle after 40 isn't salmon. It isn't chicken. It's something most people walk right past at the butcher, and almost nobody talks about why. What I'm about to share with you today is not a trend. It's not a supplement ad. It's a conversation I've had with patients behind closed doors, people who came to me confused, frustrated, and quietly terrified because their bodies were changing in ways they couldn't explain. And what I found after years of research changed how I look at aging entirely. But before I get there, I need to ask you something. When was the last time you stood up from a chair and felt your legs struggle just a little more than they used to? When was the last time you climbed a flight of stairs and noticed your breathing got heavier? Not because you're out of shape, but because something felt different. Heavier, slower, less like you. If that sounds familiar, I want you to stay with me. Because what's happening in your body right now is not what you think it is. Most people assume that feeling weaker with age is just part of the process. They call it getting older. Their doctors shrug. Their families say slow down. And so they do. They slow down. They sit more. They assume this is just life after 50. But here's what they don't tell you in those conversations. The loss of muscle mass is not a passive event. It is not simply the passage of time leaving its mark. It is a biological process that accelerates silently, invisibly, and it has a name. It's called sarcopenia. And by the time most people realize what's happening, it has already been going on for years. Sarcopenia is not weakness. It is not fatigue. It is the actual, measurable loss of muscle tissue from your body. We're talking about the fibers that hold you upright when you walk, that keep your balance when you step off a curb, that give you the strength to carry groceries, to lift a grandchild, to live independently, without depending on someone else to catch you when you stumble. Those fibers are disappearing. And the speed at which they disappear depends almost entirely on factors that your doctor probably never mentioned. The first thing you need to understand is this. After the age of 40, most adults lose between 3 and 8% of their muscle mass every decade. After 60, that rate can double, and it doesn't announce itself. There's no alarm, no dramatic symptom. It begins as a slight change in how your body feels after a long day. Then it becomes a change in how your clothes fit. Then one morning you realize you're gripping the handrail on the stairs not out of habit, but out of necessity. That's the terrifying part. Not the weakness itself, but the silence of it. The way it creeps in while you're living your life, assuming everything is fine, doing all the things you were told to do, eating protein, staying active, taking your vitamins, and still losing ground. Here's what most people, including most physicians, don't fully understand about why this happens. The problem is not simply that you're eating less protein than you need. The problem is that your body has started to respond differently to the protein you do eat. This is called anabolic resistance. And it's one of the most important concepts in aging science that almost no one in mainstream medicine talks about. As you age, the biological signals that tell your muscles to grow and repair after eating protein begin to weaken. Your body becomes, in a very real sense, less efficient at using the nutrition you give it. The same amount of protein that would have built and maintained muscle in your 30s becomes insufficient in your 50s. The machinery is still there, but the signal is getting quieter. And it doesn't stop there. Running alongside anabolic resistance is something called low-grade chronic inflammation. This is not the inflammation you feel when you sprain your ankle. This is a slow, persistent, systemic process happening inside your muscle tissue, damaging fibers, disrupting repair, and quietly accelerating the very loss you're trying to prevent. Most people carrying this kind of inflammation don't feel it directly. They feel it as tiredness, as stiffness in the morning that takes longer to shake, as a body that seems to recover more slowly from things that never used to bother them. And then there is the third factor, the one almost no one is talking about, the quality and composition of the protein you are eating. This is where the butcher's secret comes in. For decades, public health advice pushed people toward lean cuts, skinless chicken, low-fat everything. And those recommendations weren't entirely wrong. But they were incomplete in a way that has left millions of people nutritionally blind to what their muscles actually need. Because while everyone was loading up on chicken breasts and protein powder, one of the most nutrient-dense muscle-supportive foods available was being pushed aside, underpriced, undervalued, sold for almost nothing at the back of the butcher counter. And the people who knew its value, the old butchers, the traditional cooks, the old-world athletes, they kept eating it quietly while the rest of us counted grams away. That food is beef heart, and what it contains will change the way you think about muscle nutrition entirely. Beef heart is a muscle, the hardest working muscle in any animal's body. It beats without rest under constant load for years, and the nutritional profile it carries reflects exactly that kind of demand. Per 100 grams, beef heart contains more protein than chicken breast, not slightly more, meaningfully more, with a complete amino acid profile that feeds your muscle tissue at the level it actually needs. But protein content alone doesn't tell the full story. Beef heart is one of the richest natural sources of coenzyme Q10, CoQ10, a compound your body produces less of with every passing year. CoQ10 is not just an antioxidant. It is directly involved in cellular energy production inside your muscle fibers. When CoQ10 declines, energy production inside your cells declines. Muscle recovery slows. The signals that drive repair and regeneration grow faint. And nobody connects the dots because nobody told them to look there. Beef heart also contains high levels of B vitamins, particularly B12 and B6, which are essential for nerve function, red blood cell production, and the metabolic pathways that convert food into energy available to your muscles. It carries zinc, selenium, and iron in forms your body absorbs more efficiently than most plant-based sources. And it contains natural creatine, the same compound athletes spend billions supplementing, present here in its whole food form, in the very tissue that evolved to produce and use it at maximum efficiency. And it costs almost nothing. Literally, in most butcher shops, beef heart is one of the cheapest cut available, because people don't ask for it, because it was quietly removed from our cultural memory, somewhere between the rise of processed food and the era of skinless chicken. But the butchers who have been in the trade for 30 or 40 years still know. They still eat it themselves. And now you know why. But here's where I need to stop and be direct with you, because understanding what's happening is only half of this conversation. The other half is understanding what to do about it. If you've been feeling a change in your strength, if stairs feel harder than they did 2 years ago, if you've noticed that your body doesn't recover the way it used to from a long walk, from a hard day, from a night of poor sleep, I want you to understand something clearly. This is not inevitable. This is not simply aging. This is a system that is not being properly supported, and a system that is not supported will continue to decline, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, silently, year after year, until the things you take for granted today become the things you struggle with tomorrow. The research on muscle loss in aging adults is unambiguous on one point. Early intervention changes outcomes. The people who address anabolic resistance, who optimize their nutritional support, who take the biological signals seriously while their bodies are still responding. They are not the ones losing independence at 70. They are the ones still walking without assistance, still carrying their own groceries, still living on their own terms. The ones who wait until the weakness becomes impossible to ignore are working against a much steeper curve. What you're feeling right now, that slight erosion of strength, that quiet shift in how your body moves, is your biology speaking to you. And the window in which that signal can be acted on does not stay open forever. There is a natural method that a growing number of people have been using to support muscle function and help the body maintain what it's built. Not a drug, not a synthetic compound, but a combination of the 8 essential amino acids your body cannot produce on its own, provided in a form that gives your muscle tissue exactly what it needs to do its job. This combination doesn't replace effort or nutrition. What it does is help ensure that the effort you're making and the nutrition you're consuming actually translates into muscle support, bridging the gap that anabolic resistance creates, helping your body do what it was designed to do, but what it becomes less efficient at doing with age. If this is resonating with you, I want you to look at the link in the description of this video and in the first comment below. What you'll find there explains this in more detail, the mechanism, the ingredients, and why the combination matters specifically for adults over 40. Take a moment to read it, because what you do in the next few weeks may matter more than what you did in the last few years. Now, let me return to what's happening inside your body, because understanding the mechanism is what gives you the power to act on it intelligently. When a muscle fiber is damaged through use, which is a normal, necessary part of how muscle maintains itself, the repair process depends on a cascade of biological signals, satellite cells, and available amino acids. In younger adults, this process is efficient. Damage happens, signals fire, repair begins almost immediately. But as anabolic resistance develops, the threshold required to trigger that repair process increases. The signal has to be louder to produce the same response. And if the nutritional raw materials aren't available in sufficient quantity and quality, if the amino acid pool is thin, if inflammation is high, if CoQ10 is low, if the mitochondria inside the muscle cells aren't functioning efficiently, the repair is incomplete. The fiber comes back slightly weaker than it was before. And over months and years, that slight deficit compounds into something that feels like aging, but is at its core a failure of the support system. This is why the type of protein matters as much as the amount. This is why beef heart in its whole food form carries compounds that isolated protein sources simply don't have. Not just the amino acids, but the cofactors, the minerals, the CoQ10, the natural creatine, the B vitamins that make the entire biological process function efficiently. It is, in a very real sense, food designed by millions of years of evolution to maintain the most demanding muscle in a living body. And that design maps almost perfectly onto what your skeletal muscles need to resist the effects of sarcopenia. Let me tell you something I've observed over 2 decades of working with aging patients. The ones who struggle most in their late 60s and 70s are almost never the ones who had the most dramatic health events. They are the ones who ignored the slow signals, the mild fatigue they attributed to stress, the slight weakness they assumed was just a bad week, the change in balance they noticed but didn't mention at their next appointment. They're the ones who, 5 or 10 years earlier, were sitting where you are now, with a body that was still responsive, still capable of being supported, and they waited, not because they were careless, because nobody told them what the signals meant. I'm telling you now, the loss of muscle mass is not a cosmetic issue. It is not about how you look in the mirror. It is the foundation of your functional independence, your ability to walk without falling, to recover from illness, to maintain bone density, because muscle pulls on bone and bone responds by staying dense, to regulate blood sugar, to maintain healthy circulation, to keep your metabolism active. Every system in your body is connected to the health of your musculature, and when that foundation begins to erode, everything built on top of it becomes less stable. The question is not whether you will experience some degree of muscle loss as you age. Some loss is inevitable. The question is whether you will lose ground slowly, with your system supported and your biology working in your favor, or whether you will lose it quickly, quietly, while assuming everything is fine, until one day you realize that the version of yourself you took for granted is gone. That is the reality, and I am not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you this because you are still in a position to act, because your body is still responding, because the window is still open, but it is not infinitely open. And the people who act while they still have time are the ones who look back 5 years from now and say, I'm glad I listened. I'm glad I didn't wait until it was harder to come back. The combination of 8 essential amino acids I mentioned earlier, the ones your body cannot produce on its own, is not a miracle. Nothing I would ever recommend to you is a miracle. What it is a targeted nutritional strategy based on the exact mechanism by which aging muscles lose their ability to respond. It gives your body the building blocks to support the protein it needs, so you can feel fitter, stronger, and more like the version of yourself you remember. Not younger, not invincible, just supported, just working as it should. If you are 40, 50, 60, or beyond, and you have felt even one of the things I've described today, I want you to take this seriously. Not tomorrow. Not after you see how the next few weeks go. Now, because the people who moved quickly, who took the signal seriously while their bodies were still in a position to respond, they are the ones I hear from 6 months later saying they didn't realize how much ground they had already gotten back until they stopped losing it. The link is in the description and in the first comment below. Go there, read what it says, understand the method, and then make a decision not out of fear but out of intelligence. Because you now know something that most people walking into a butcher shop don't know. You know what the signal means. And you know that the time to act on it is not when the weakness is impossible to ignore. It's right now, while you still have everything to gain.